Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. I'm Mikkel Dia, your host, and today I have a very special guest because he's been able to coach businesses and agency owners and marketers as to how to approach their business in a slightly new way, to become fractional CMOs, to grow by not just having a traditional agency, but by actually being able to package your expertise into this fractional CMO role. And we'll really dive into what that looks like and how you can also do it yourself. John Jantsch, thank you very much for being here. I'm very happy to have you.
Yeah, my pleasure. It'll be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to dive into the details of this. You and I have spoken a lot over the last few weeks about kind of your journey and all of that stuff. But before we dive into the journey, let's start with a little humble brag. Let's talk about what you've been able to do for your clients, what you've been able to do for your own business. In a sense, why should people listen to you?
You bet. So I guess I have to start with I'm coming up on 30 years of owning my own business. That's one place I suppose I could say I'm a survivor, right, is my humble brag. But I think if I have any mark of my body of work, it's been that there was a period of time when the small to mid-sized business, nobody really wanted them. Nobody was really after that business. And frankly, I understand why. It's kind of hard to work with them in a traditional sense as a marketing agency. And I think we really kind of cracked that and figured out how to work with small and mid-sized businesses and really bring a lot of value as well as profitability in working with small to mid-sized businesses. And today, I think a lot of people obviously are going after that market because it's more accessible. It's easier to reach everybody. But I think we really were on the cusp of that. When I wrote my first book, Duct Tape Marketing, I think it was really seen as somewhat innovative and groundbreaking way to approach marketing for small to mid-sized businesses. So that's, I suppose, if I have a claim to fame, it is kind of opening up that under $30 million market that a lot of people weren't really going after.
So let's talk about that. How did you even get there? How did you decide you were going to do this?
So before I started my agency, I worked for an agency and we had very large clients. And so I learned, the traditional path. So when I went out on my own, I knew I could hustle work. That was about the extent of my plan. And so I got clients, big projects, little projects. I found that I really enjoyed working with small businesses, but I also discovered pretty quickly they were really frustrating. They had the same needs and never the same budgets or even attention spans. And so I just one day said, look, if I'm going to work with this market, I got to figure out a different way. And so without much thought, I went and said to the next prospect, I said, look, here's how I work. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here are the results we hope to get. And here's what it costs. Do you want it or not? The first three people I said that to were like, where have you been? Because marketing for small and mid-sized businesses was hard 30 years ago. Buying marketing services was hard. It's next to impossible today because there's so many platforms, so much technology. Everybody's selling the idea of the week. So I think that idea that somebody was going to walk in, they were going to start with strategy before tactics, they were going to install a marketing system and you knew what it was going to cost, really was very appealing to the market. And so I went to work really for the next 10 years building that, delivering, but also while I was delivering, building that kind of repeatable model.
Interesting. So let's look at the journey itself. So you kind of launched your own agency after leaving kind of your bigger, more traditional agency. It is extremely frustrating to work with smaller businesses sometimes because they expect the world out of very little, and it can be challenging if you don't know how to navigate that. So you were doing more kind of, I guess, traditional tactic-based, SEO.
Yeah. So I always led with strategy because I always found it really fascinating that I would walk into a small business and they were doing a little of this and they had one person doing a little of that. And nobody was talking to each other. And it's like, how do you even know what's going on? Like, how are you even tracking what's working and what's not working? And by the way, the headline on your website says you're an accounting firm. We know that already. How do you have a message that is going to grab an ideal client, right? So I always just found that really fascinating. Maybe my traditional kind of training gave me that, that's how business works, right? You have a strategy, but none of these small businesses did. And so what I was able to bring them, I think, even if it wasn't earth shattering. I mean, I was getting them to understand how to narrow their focus to a truly ideal client, to have messaging that was going to allow them to differentiate, to start thinking about this idea that there is a customer journey. It's not a matter of run an ad, get a customer. And so just bringing some of that, what I thought was just really basic thinking in marketing to small and mid-sized businesses, really gave them the chance to dramatically impact their businesses and grow. I mean, I have businesses that grew 3,000-4,000% just because they weren't doing anything, but the founder was pretty good at selling what it was that they did. And but once they saw, here's what content is going to do for you, and here's what actually focusing on SEO is going to do for you in a right way, they experienced dramatic growth.
So now again, like you kind of transition towards this strategy based approach, and where you're at now, you mostly help agencies kind of package their services into fractional CMO. You still run the agency?
That's right. We still have an agency. We've always led with strategy. So when somebody comes to us and says, "I need a website," we say, "Yes, you do." However, what you need is a strategist. So people actually, they can't engage us any other way than through this thing we call strategy first. And that, that approach is something we've always done. I would say the pandemic, like it sucked for a lot of reasons. It also drove a lot of things, very positive things, I think, that were already happening. It accelerated them. I think a lot of businesses got caught off guard with, times were good, they were doing well. All of a sudden, they realized they didn't have a strategy. And so what I think happened that has really opened up this fractional CMO positioning, at least, is that the market all of a sudden is very open to it. Fractional everything really became, very, very fashionable. People understood it. I think a lot of, the fractional CMO model has actually been around for quite some time, but it's really been that $100 million business that, felt like they didn't need a full-time CMO that would take that approach. But what I think is happening now is you've got these $10, $15 million businesses are all of a sudden saying, you know what, we do need strategy. We do need somebody who is advocating for the customer, advocating for marketing, inside of our organization. So we have that function. And the idea now that, hey, we could actually have that at a fraction of the cost or a fraction of the time, I think has just become very acceptable.
Yeah. I mean, when I don't run my agency anymore, and now I follow analytics, but it's everything that we used to do as well. Like at the end of the day, to come up with the strategy first, and the way I would actually kind of package my services is I would go and say, okay, well, first and foremost, what we're going to do is we're going to map out the plan, right? I just happen to use a whiteboard to map out the strategy. I wouldn't go deep into brand and all of that stuff, but I would focus a lot on your messaging and your offer and stuff like this. Then what we would do is move on to, okay, well, now that we understand what this entire thing looks like, all the different pieces, etc. Now let's go into the build. Let's go into the project phase, and then we move on to the retainer phase, or however you kind of decide to structure it. So tell me about like the challenges that you've faced, kind of, because it sounds like the first couple people you spoke to, it was like, yeah, this sounds really, really good. But we all know that it's not a linear path to the riches. So what were some of the challenges like transitioning towards this model, and what did you have to figure out? What did you have to learn? What did you have to adjust kind of along the way?
Well, I mean, one of the things you learn is when you go out there and start saying, we sell strategy. Well, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to go buy some strategy, right? So one of the challenges is to really help people, educate people, first off, what it is, but secondly, why they need it, I think. And that, there's so much confusion. You get 10 marketers together, they probably couldn't all agree on what marketing strategy actually is. And so imagine, the customer out there. So really doing enough education to get people to understand that a lot of the symptoms they were experiencing in their business, competing on price, not being able to have consistent lead flow. A lot of those were due to a lack of strategy. So helping people understand that's what strategy fixed just takes a little bit of education.
Where did that tipping point occur? Because I mean, you're going back into the, you were fed up one day, but like, what was that real tipping point?
For me, it's when I hustled any work I could get, right? So I had some very, very like Fortune 500 clients that had like projects that they wanted me to do.
Yep.
And I did a project, and I remember it was something goofy. It was like, I want to say the invoice was like $1,250 that I sent them for this little bit of work, and I got a check for $125,000 90 days, of course, later. But and then I called them up and I was like, "Hey, you're not gonna believe this," and they were like, "Well, we're going to send you these 3 forms that you have to fill out so you can give us the check back." And I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Did you send them the money
back?
I
sent the money back. If there had been one more zero, I would have been a little more tempted, but somebody was going to figure it out. So yes, I sent the money back. But,
very noble of you.
but it just drove home the point how much I enjoyed working and getting results for the person who was actually writing the check as well, and making a decision about whether or not to invest in marketing or to buy braces for their daughters. So that's what really still motivates me today. Is I am a small owner. I love working with small and mid-sized business owners because I just think that that's they're the saviors of the world, quite frankly, and so it's such an honor to get to work with them.
You're 100% right. Small businesses and small business owners, they're innovating the world. They're changing our future, and that's really what it comes down to. And so I want to understand a little bit more about the coaching side of things. So now you spend a lot of your time teaching people the fractional CMO framework. So what does that look like? Like, what's that process look like? And I'd love for you to kind of wrap it up with, what's the best kind of way that I can grow a CMO, like growth tactic wise, to get clients for a fractional CMO?
So one of the things that I think we've done, the fractional CMO model's been around for quite some time, but it typically looked like somebody with some pretty good years of experience deciding to hang out a shingle, and they sell 25% of their time to 4 different companies. They might be paid quite well, on an hourly basis, but pretty tough to scale that model. And so when we started taking this model to that smaller $30 million business, well, typically they didn't have a marketing team. So they definitely needed fractional CMO advice. They needed strategic advice. But we weren't just creating a plan and saying, good luck. They were like, this is awesome. Who's going to do it? So we actually create what is probably more of a hybrid model. We call ours a fractional CMO agency. And so we are actually doing the strategic work, but we're also doing the implementation, or we're teaching people how to build teams, to implement, for them or on their behalf. So that's a real significant difference, I think, in our model, is that we have been able to teach people to take this model and really scale, build, account managers and, folks underneath kind of their consulting, so that they're not just selling their big brain, right? They're selling a repeatable process. So that's probably the biggest differentiation. So in addition to teaching people what we've learned in building this model ourselves, we actually give them the closest thing there is to a product called Strategy First. We actually license that to them, which is completely everything from the intake to the final deliverable is completely scripted and can be taught to just about anybody who's got some amount of marketing experience. And so that's probably what has led, I think, to the significant growth of our training and licensing model, is that I think a lot of people want to do this, but they don't really know where to start. They've been an SEO or a web firm, primarily. They want to get into strategy, but where do you start, or how do you build that? And so, I think they're very attracted to the fact that we've built something that's now lasted the test of 15 years of time, has been taught to thousands of agencies or installed in thousands of businesses. So that's what they're really acquiring, is not just the training, but actual license to use all of our tools as well.
That's really cool. I like that, and because it's it's almost like an agency in a box in a sense. It's a way to it's a franchise in a sense model without paying the franchise fee, I assume, or maybe there is a recurring fee. I'm not sure, but at the end of the day, the idea is how do I systemize and productize the fractional CMO offer? Okay, let's assume I am a fractional CMO. I have a small team behind me who can kind of do the actual execution of the work. Um, what's your best tactic to get clients?
Yep. So there are two, and this is true of professional services. High ticket, high trust selling is not done with cold email outreach. Not unless you've got really a lot of other things going on, right? It is strategic partners, and it is getting up and speaking on podcasts or in webinars or on stages where your audience is hanging out, so that you have the ability for them to come to know who you are, to like your message, to build some amount of trust, really almost experience what it might be like to work with you. Those are, strategic partners and speaking for leads, as I call it, are really by far and away. We have people that have built their entire practices, 7-figure practices of doing this kind of consulting, doing nothing else but that.
Yeah, honestly, it is. I think that is for any business at the end of the day. Strategic partners. Who was I speaking to? I was speaking to somebody the other day, and they kind of gave a good example of like, well, oh, he was advising a company who does like like a private chef. And the first thing the person's like, man, I don't want to go to mansions and knock on doors and be like, you guys need a private chef? That's not going to work. So he's like, how do I get like customers for this? And the first thing that the guy kind of advised him on is, well, guess what? People who have mansions and can afford a private chef also have cleaners. So go to the cleaners and go and see if you can set up a strategic partnership, because they're never going to compete with you. They're not going to start cooking after they clean. But they certainly could see that as an upsell and a way to generate some extra revenue for just doing a referral, right? At the end of the day.
I thought you were going to say personal trainers. That'd be another one I'd go after.
Personal trainers would work very well too, right?
Yeah.
And that would be very much in line as well. But that's the same concept as you're 100% right. Going after strategic partners and yeah, doing these types of shows, these types of podcasts. Like a big reason why I go on a lot of podcasts, a big reason why I host these podcasts is because number one, like you said, it allows people to get to know you before getting to know you in a sense. They can hear you, they can start to know, like, and trust you. But it also allows you to understand how to get your message out there in a way that resonates with people, right? So one quick question, actually, as a follow up, and then we'll wrap up here today. But one quick question: okay, how do I stand out then as let's call it as a fractional CMO? I mean, let's say you license your system to 20,000 people. Okay, and that means I got 20,000 other fractional CMOs who basically say the same thing ultimately, because they all got the same training from John. So how do I stand out from all other 20,000?
So I'm not a huge proponent of, a lot of people give the advice of you pick a niche, pick some way to, really narrow your focus and say, here's who we help. I'm not a huge fan of that, mainly because I see a lot of people just saying, oh, I think there's an opportunity with dentists. I'm going to go work with them. And then, 6 months in, they're like, I hate dentists. No offense if any dentists are listening, but I mean, they're all of a sudden, they're like, I got to start over again. So what I always tell people is to don't niche your market, niche your marketing. So if you've got, a couple industries where you've got some case studies, tailor your marketing, personalize your marketing to go out and try to market to those industries, and find others, that your message will resonate with. But truthfully, the fractional CMO positioning and leading with strategy before tactics, sadly to say, is pretty big differentiator still today. There really aren't that many people that are doing it. There's, a lot of agencies are still selling, what tactics do you need this week? And I think it's a big differentiator, just being able to say, we're going to start with strategy.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, especially when you position it as like, look, you need this person who is actually thinking at the same level as you are as a CEO, who's there strategically thinking about how are we going to approach this, um, because you're as CEO not that person. So it makes a lot of sense.
Well, and just orchestrating the moving parts. I say that word to a lot of business owners, and they're like, "Yeah, I just need somebody quarterbacking this thing because there's just too many pieces, to this." And so, just having somebody that can offer that, I think is pretty compelling right there.
100%. A great way to kind of approach it. You can charge a lot more too, by the way, than just doing when you do, let's say, just SEO. It's hard to charge more because people just see it as SEO. I can go on Upwork and I can pay somebody $10 an hour to do SEO for me. So why would I pay?
One of the things many of the folks that take our approach, come back and tell us is it's changed my relationship with my clients. They now see me as a trusted advisor, where before I was a vendor.
Exactly, and that's a really, really interesting way to summarize it. That's very cool. So, John, how can people learn more about you if they want to dive deeper into fractional CMO? If they want to follow you, learn more about you, where can they go?
You bet. So the easiest place, and you can kind of choose your adventure because you'll find stuff to a bunch of freebies there, but is at dtm.world. So DTM like duct tape marketing, even though it's probably mirrored backwards on my hat. Duct tape or dtm.world/growth. And you'll find some freebies there that you might find extremely valuable, especially if this message has resonated with you.
Awesome. That sounds really cool. So go and check that out. We'll add those into the show notes as well. And John, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing all this advice. It is a way of the world when it comes to marketing and scaling your service based business. So I appreciate you leading the charge on this, and thank you for sharing all of these goodness with everybody.
Well, I appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you.